I have no doubt that this is the last resting place of LJ-850, the missing Sterling, here in this field.
When experts find a World War II airfield photo in a forgotten archive, they are surprised when they realize no airstrip was ever recorded on those coordinates. And when they zoom in on a corner of the picture, they discover something that was hidden for decades, but still deserves to be brought back to life. A forgotten photograph. In the quiet of Dartmouth College's archive room, a single black and white photograph caught the attention of an archivist sorting through a box of unsorted wartime materials. It was dated April 10, 1944, and appeared to show a section of countryside in eastern England. The photo looked ordinary at first glance, showing hedgerows, a cluster of trees, and faint markings that might have been fields or tracks. But under magnification, it revealed something completely different, a long stretch of tarmac shaped unmistakably like an airstrip. This image had arrived at the college as part of a forgotten collection of aerial reconnaissance photos from the Second World War. For decades, the photo sat undisturbed, its label smudged, its importance overlooked. When it was finally scanned and archived digitally, the high-resolution copy exposed more than anyone expected. The coordinates pointed to the Norfolk region of eastern England, an area already mapped thoroughly during and after the war. Yet no records mentioned an airfield there. This small discovery was the spark that would send a team of historians and researchers down a path of mystery, grief, and rediscovery. The photograph would open a door into a secret that had somehow survived untouched for nearly 80 years. Behind the faded ink and grainy resolution lay traces of a wartime operation that had deliberately been erased from memory. And the deeper they looked, the more it became clear that the photo held more than a landscape. It held a story. From that day, Dartmouth's historians decided to trace every clue. The first step was finding out how this photo had even ended up in their archives. The image that changed the course of research had been donated by a man named Walter Brinkley, a former reconnaissance technician who had served with the Allied Photographic Intelligence Unit during the Second World War. Brinkley had passed away in the late 1990s, but before his death, he left behind several boxes of negatives, prints, and journals that he wanted preserved at Dartmouth College, his alma mater. He noted in his donation letter that many of the materials had no official record, but were worth keeping for the sake of truth. Among these items was the photograph dated April 10, 1944. Brinkley's notes identified it only as Eastern England Sector, Unidentified Field. The archivists filed it among thousands of other reconnaissance photos, never realizing its true value. Only when the university began digitizing its collection decades later did the image resurface. The process was meticulous. Each print was scanned in high definition, logged, and tagged by grid reference using wartime coordinates. When the Norfolk image was scanned, the computer's automatic tagging system failed to match it with any existing Royal Air Force base or Allied airstrip. The software flagged it as unidentified facility. Dr. Aaron Kessler, a historian at Dartmouth who specialized in wartime reconnaissance analysis, was reviewing the flagged images when he saw Brinkley's photo. Something about the shape of the runways caught his attention. They were too perfect, too deliberately built to be anything but a functional airfield. Yet no such airfield existed in wartime archives, maps, or post-war surveys. This contradiction sparked his curiosity. Who built it? Why it had vanished from record? And what it had been used for were questions that refused to fade from his mind. The historian. Dr. Kessler had spent years studying wartime aerial photography and the secret mapping operations of Allied intelligence. His office walls were lined with old reconnaissance maps, weathered notebooks, and enlarged photographs showing hidden German installations and decoy sites. When he came across the Norfolk image, he sensed something rare. He began by enlarging the digital scan to its highest clarity. At that scale, the details came alive. Runway intersections forming a distinct A pattern, a control hut positioned near a tree line, and faint tire marks on a service road leading south. These were the unmistakable signs of an operational field, not a decoy. Cross-referencing the coordinates with wartime Royal Air Force station maps, Kessler found nothing, not even a notation for a temporary landing ground. The spot was marked as open farmland. That made the finding extraordinary, because by April 1944, nearly every usable airfield in Britain had been catalogued and assigned a designation. He reached out to the university's photographic restoration department, requesting a spectral analysis of the image to verify age and composition. The test confirmed that the emulsion and paper matched genuine Allied reconnaissance stock used during early 1944. This proved the image's authenticity. In a recorded interview years later, Kessler said, "When the scan came through, it was as though someone had hidden a page of history in plain sight." His next step was to determine whether this was an unrecorded Allied base or something far more secret. That investigation would lead him deep into the records of eastern England, specifically the quiet farmlands of Norfolk. The Norfolk region and the missing airfield. The Norfolk countryside, stretching along England's eastern coast, played an enormous role during the Second World War. Its flat terrain made it perfect for airstrips, and by 1944, the area was dotted with both Royal Air Force and American Army Air Force stations. Villages like Horsham St. Faith, Rackheath, and Adelbridge all hosted bustling air bases, supporting the Allied bombing campaign. Yet when Dr. Kessler overlaid Brinkley's photograph on wartime maps, the airfield he saw lay between two known sites, but was marked as nothing but agricultural land. Local historical societies in Norfolk had no record of construction there. Even post-war aerial surveys showed no clear trace, suggesting it had either been dismantled immediately after the war or deliberately disguised. Kessler traveled to Norfolk with a small research team, including doctoral student Lena Mori and geographer Raj Patel. They began their investigation by cross-checking British National Archives airfield registries, engineering logs, and Royal Air Force construction records. Nothing matched the coordinates. It was as if the airfield had never existed. Using modern satellite imagery and contour analysis, Patel compared the terrain with the wartime photograph. Subtle irregularities in soil color and vegetation revealed faint rectangular outlines, perfectly matching the position of runways in the photo. This was confirmation that something large had once been there. Residents living nearby spoke of hearing aircraft late at night during the war, but were always told it was part of training exercises. Some older locals mentioned soldiers who came and left quickly, leaving behind only silence. To Kessler, this secrecy suggested one thing: the site might have been tied to a classified wartime mission. And as the team delved deeper, they began to uncover fragments of a story buried beneath decades of official silence. Zooming in, the photographic evidence. Back at Dartmouth, Dr. Aaron Kessler requested a full digital enhancement of Brinkley's photograph using spectral and contrast layer imaging. The goal was to bring out fine details invisible to the naked eye. The process began with ultra-high-resolution scanning, followed by algorithmic sharpening to distinguish shadows, tracks, and structural lines. What emerged stunned the team. The faint marks on the print resolved into 3 clear runways, intersecting at a precise angle. A control hut, fuel depot, and several camouflaged hangars appeared along the edge of a copse. The precision indicated that this was no improvised landing strip. It was a professionally constructed facility, complete with taxiways and dispersal bays. Even more puzzling was the alignment of the main runway, oriented almost perfectly east-west. This suggested it was designed for short-range tactical flights rather than heavy bombers, which typically required longer north-south alignments to accommodate prevailing winds. That detail would later prove vital. Kessler's team used image registration software to overlay the photograph with current satellite data. Despite decades of agricultural use, the faint geometric pattern of the runways was still visible in soil composition and drainage lines. The team confirmed that the coordinates lay near a rural boundary east of Dereham, Norfolk. Yet every official record, both Allied and local, insisted the area had never hosted an airfield. By cross-checking the serial number etched on the film's edge, Kessler traced the photo to a reconnaissance sortie flown by the United States 9th Air Force. The timing, April 10, 1944, placed it just weeks before the Normandy landings. The photograph therefore represented a period of intense Allied secrecy. Someone had constructed an operational airfield in total silence, flown missions from it, and then wiped it from history. That realization marked the beginning of a more collaborative investigation. Once the photo's authenticity was verified, Kessler assembled a small interdisciplinary team to explore its origins. Among them was Lena Mori, a doctoral candidate known for her expertise in military code systems. Mori had previously studied declassified transport ledgers, referencing something called Noble 17 Third Transport, a term she believed connected to covert Allied supply chains. Joining them was Raj Patel, a geographical analyst from King's College London, who specialized in wartime cartography and the use of aerial overlays to reconstruct lost infrastructure. The three began their research by dividing responsibilities. Kessler focused on historical documentation and military correspondence. Maury searched intelligence files for code words related to the Norfolk region. Patel handled terrain analysis, overlaying wartime reconnaissance with modern land survey data. Their aim was to determine who built the hidden base and why. Patel's spatial mapping confirmed that the runways corresponded with ground features still faintly visible today, gentle ridges following the original tarmac footprint. Meanwhile, Maury's research produced an extraordinary find, a brief entry in a Royal Air Force logistics memo from late March 1944, referring to temporary fair use transport facilities. Noble 17, 3rd Transport, leave no trace. The phrasing "leave no trace" implied intentional erasure once the operation concluded. This discovery transformed the team's understanding. The mysterious airfield was likely built for a classified logistics mission. As pieces began to fit together, Maury discovered another clue hidden in the Dartmouth archives, a personal journal belonging to a Lieutenant Curtis Rowe, a transport pilot stationed in Britain during the same period. His notes mentioned a sealed crate delivered under strict orders to an unnamed strip in Norfolk. That journal would unravel the heart of the mystery. Lieutenant Curtis Rowe and his journal. Lieutenant Curtis Rowe's journal, written in neat cursive inside a leather notebook, had been catalogued years earlier among general wartime memorabilia. It was only after Maury's cross-reference that the entry for April 12, 1944, gained new significance. Rowe described taking off from a temporary United States Army Air Force base near Wittering and flying a short transport mission to a provisional field somewhere east of Durham. His instructions were explicit. No radio contact, visual navigation only, and upon landing, immediate offload of a sealed wooden crate marked with the letter F. Rowe wrote that upon arrival, the field appeared too new to be real, with freshly laid tarmac and minimal infrastructure. A small group of uniformed men waited, none wearing standard insignia. After the crate was unloaded, Rowe was handed a slip reading only, "Operation Fairfoot, report complete." He was told never to mention the flight again. Historians later confirmed Rowe had served with a transport unit attached to the 9th Air Force, responsible for covert logistics ahead of the Normandy campaign. The date, April 12th, aligned perfectly with the photograph's timestamp 2 days earlier. Rowe's entry also mentioned hearing of another pilot lost during a similar run, possibly explaining why the site was kept off record. Any trace might have revealed sensitive operations. Rowe survived the war and returned to Ohio, where his journals were passed down to his family. Decades later, his nephew donated them to Dartmouth, unaware of their connection to Brinkley's photograph. When Maury compared the handwriting and mission details with operational ledgers, every element matched. For the research team, Rowe's account provided the missing human perspective. It confirmed that the secret airfield was active, functional, and part of an operation deliberately concealed from official archives. The next step was to understand the mission itself, coded under one name, Operation Fairfoot. Operation Fairfoot, April to May 1944. The phrase Operation Fairfoot appeared only twice in surviving Allied documentation, once in Rowe's note and once in a partially redacted British Army logistics report dated May 2, 1944. From these fragments, historians pieced together a cautious narrative. Fairfoot was not an offensive strike mission, but a transport initiative involving prototype navigation equipment, likely destined for use in airborne operations during the Normandy invasion. The mission's secrecy stemmed from the experimental technology involved. The crate Rowe delivered may have contained early radar guidance components or proximity fuses, both of which were highly classified. To protect the technology, the operation required an unregistered site where testing and transfer could occur without drawing attention. The Norfolk field, concealed between legitimate air bases, was ideal. Kessler's team verified this theory through additional documents found at the Imperial War Museum archives. One entry mentioned temporary operational strips constructed under Royal Engineers to be dismantled post-testing. The Norfolk coordinates corresponded with one of these provisional sites. The directive, "leave no trace," likely meant the structures were dismantled immediately after the mission's completion. By late May 1944, satellite comparisons and soil readings suggested the runways had already been torn up and reseeded. Local farmers resumed work on the land within weeks, explaining why later aerial surveys recorded nothing unusual. Operation Fairfoot remained unknown for nearly 8 decades, preserved only through an overlooked photograph, a handwritten journal, and the curiosity of modern historians. What began as a faint image on fading paper had revealed a story of wartime secrecy, human precision, and loss deliberately hidden in plain sight. What the photo and fieldwork revealed. When Dr. Aaron Kessler's team finally reached the Norfolk site, the photograph came to life in the most unexpected way. The field that once held runways was now covered in barley, bordered by hedges and narrow farm lanes. Yet when Raj Patel's ground-penetrating radar scans began, faint linear echoes appeared beneath the soil, forming the exact pattern seen in Brinkley's photo. The main runway stretched for nearly 1,200 yards, lined by compacted gravel and remnants of asphalt. The team also uncovered fragments of concrete, rusted fuel drums, and small pieces of corrugated metal buried near the southern boundary. Each artifact was logged, photographed, and dated. Soil composition tests revealed traces of aviation fuel and hydraulic fluid, consistent with mid-1940 aviation use. Even more telling were the outlines of two rectangular bunkers partially collapsed under the earth. These matched the dark shapes visible in the lower corner of the original photograph. Kessler described standing on the field, comparing the modern landscape with the aerial image projected on his tablet. The alignment was perfect. This site had indeed hosted a functional airfield, and it had been built to disappear. Local council records from 1945 confirmed that the land had been reclaimed for agriculture, with no mention of prior military occupation. One of the more surprising discoveries was a narrow stretch of brick foundation leading to a depression in the soil that locals called the Old Trench. It was, in fact, a camouflaged service road leading to what might have been a fuel or communication outpost. These physical traces were irrefutable. The Norfolk Airfield was real, operational, and meticulously erased. From that moment, the investigation took on a more personal tone. Behind the runways and coordinates were the people who built and used this forgotten site. As the research continued, the story of the hidden airfield began to shift from one of technology and mystery to one of humanity. Through correspondence with the families of wartime servicemen, Lena Morey uncovered letters written by ground crew who had served under unrecorded postings during the spring of 1944. Many of the letters carried a tone of secrecy. One line read, "We are somewhere no one will ever know, but the work is done." For Morey, those words echoed the coded phrase she had found earlier, "Leave no trace." It reflected not only the military's directive, but also the quiet grief of those who could never share their part in the war effort. Lieutenant Rowe's own journal entries carried the same restrained melancholy. He wrote of long nights, fog-covered fields, and the sound of engines that never made it home. Kessler arranged for recorded interviews with local families who had lived near the area during the war. Several remembered their parents speaking of a convoy that arrived and vanished within weeks. An elderly woman recalled her father returning home one night, silent and pale, after being asked to help dig and cover a pit. No one in the family ever knew what the pit was for. The research team felt the growing weight of these memories. What had begun as an academic investigation was now a thread connecting forgotten lives. It was no longer about proving the existence of an airfield, but about restoring recognition to those who had served there without acknowledgement. As the team compiled their findings, a quiet consensus emerged. They would not only document the discovery, but also find a way to honor those connected to it. And so, with help from Norfolk's local council, they began plans for a memorial. The memorial and bringing the site back to life. The creation of the Norfolk Airfield Memorial was as much an act of restoration as it was remembrance. With the cooperation of local landowners, Kessler's team secured a small plot on the northern edge of the former runway. The design was simple, a stone marker engraved with the names of known personnel linked to Operation Fairfoot, surrounded by native wildflowers. At its base, a plaque bore the inscription, "For those who worked in silence and were never meant to be found." During the unveiling ceremony, held on an overcast day in early summer, veterans, descendants, and townspeople gathered. Among them were members of the Brinkley and Rowe families, who had never before met. Walter Brinkley's granddaughter read aloud a section from his notes, where he described his decision to save the reconnaissance photo. "Some things," he wrote, "deserve to be remembered, even if they were never supposed to exist." The atmosphere was solemn, but hopeful. Local schoolchildren helped place small wooden crosses along the edge of the field, symbolizing the unknown workers and airmen who had once walked there. Raj Patel later noted that this gesture gave the site a heartbeat again. The memorial not only honored those who served, but also revitalized local interest in wartime heritage. The Norfolk Historical Society established an educational trail nearby, allowing visitors to walk the faint outline of the old runway. To this day, farmers still report that after heavy rain, the shape of the airstrip briefly reappears as darker lines in the soil, a natural memorial formed by history itself. What began as a mystery hidden in a single photograph had now become a bridge between the past and present, linking the invisible efforts of a few to the collective memory of many. Why this discovery matters. The uncovering of the Norfolk Airfield is more than a tale of lost history. It is a reminder of how easily truth can fade beneath the weight of secrecy and time. During the Second World War, hundreds of temporary airfields were constructed across Britain, but nearly all were documented and later catalogued. To find one that had been deliberately omitted from all records challenges assumptions about wartime transparency. For historians, the discovery underscores the importance of archival preservation. A single photograph, preserved by chance, revealed an entire operation unknown to official historians. It demonstrates that history is not a fixed ledger, but a living mosaic, capable of change when new fragments come to light. The Norfolk site also sheds light on the human dimension of warfare. Behind every secret project were individuals who labored without recognition, often under immense pressure. Their contributions, once hidden, now stand acknowledged. The airfield's rediscovery became a quiet act of justice for those who followed orders and vanished into history's margins. Educational institutions have since referenced the case as a model for interdisciplinary research. It blends geography, archaeology, and narrative reconstruction, proving that technology and human curiosity can work together to revive the past. Perhaps the most moving outcome is how the story bridged generations. Families connected by coincidence found shared heritage in an airfield that once symbolized silence. Through remembrance, a secret meant to disappear instead became a symbol of endurance, reminding all who study it that even in war's secrecy, humanity leaves its mark. Today, the Norfolk Airfield rests beneath fields of wheat, its runways long reclaimed by the earth. Yet the names of those who served there live on in the memorial and in the research that brought them back into light. Each spring, when the crops ripple across the ground, locals say the field hums faintly underfoot, a sound carried by the wind, like distant engines returning home. Dr. Aaron Kessler often describes the discovery as a conversation with history. For him and his team, uncovering the site was not about fame or recognition, but about giving silence a voice. Lena Morey's closing words at the memorial dedication captured the sentiment best. They built something that was meant to vanish, yet it found its way back to us. That is what memory does. It insists on being found. Since then, the university and local council have continued to collaborate on educational programs, inviting students to study aerial photography and the ethics of wartime secrecy. The field has become a place of reflection, where visitors come not to mourn, but to understand. In the end, the story of the secret Norfolk Airfield is not about what was hidden, but about what endured. It shows that even when history tries to erase itself, truth finds a way to surface. Through a photograph, a journal, a buried stone, or the quiet determination of those who care enough to look closer. The past may whisper softly, but in the right hands, its echoes can still reshape the present. And in that quiet corner of Norfolk, the memory of Operation Fairfoot continues to remind the world that no trace, however small, is ever truly gone.